Beneath our feet, hidden in the silent embrace of the earth, lie secrets older than recorded time chambers, untouched for millennia, their walls whispering stories of forgotten kings, lost civilizations, and mysteries that defy explanation. Picture this: a flickering torchlight reveals a doorway sealed for thousands of years, its surface etched with symbols no living person can fully decipher. What waits inside? Treasures beyond imagination, curses meant to deter the curious, or perhaps revelations that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about history. This isn't just the stuff of adventure films. It's the real, pulse-pounding work of archaeologists who have uncovered 25 ancient tombs so astonishing they've reshaped our understanding of the past. Think about the sheer weight of that discovery: 25 tombs, each a time capsule holding clues to worlds we can barely fathom. Some were built with such precision, modern engineers still can't replicate their designs. Others were hidden so cleverly they eluded treasure hunters for centuries, only to yield their secrets to patient, relentless science. And then there are the ones that shouldn't exist at all: burial sites in places history books claimed were uninhabited, or tombs containing artifacts from cultures we never knew interacted. These aren't just holes in the ground, they're puzzle pieces waiting to snap into place, revealing a picture of humanity far richer, far stranger than we ever imagined. That's the magic of these discoveries. They don't just belong to historians or scholars. They belong to all of us. Every crumbling wall, every faded inscription, every golden artifact pulled from the dust is a thread connecting us to people who lived, loved, and dreamed thousands of years before us. And the best part, we're still finding them. Even now, somewhere in the world, a shovel might strike stone, a scanner might ping with an anomaly, and another tomb could wait to tell its story. So let's step into the shadows together, because what you're about to see isn't just a list of old graves, it's a journey into the heart of human mystery, where every discovery begs the question, what else is out there just waiting to be found? Of all the ancient tombs ever uncovered, none captured the world's imagination quite like the burial chamber of Tutankhamun. When Howard Carter first peered through a small hole into that dark, airless room in November 1922, his trembling voice whispered the now legendary words, "I see wonderful things." And what wonders they were! The flickering lamplight revealed a treasure trove untouched by time, a glittering hoard meant to accompany the young pharaoh into eternity. Golden statues, jeweled chests, and that breathtaking funerary mask, solid gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli and obsidian, stared back at him like a face frozen between life and death. But it wasn't just the opulence that stunned archaeologists. Unlike nearly every royal tomb in the Valley of the Kings, Tutankhamun's resting place had escaped the ravages of grave robbers. The boy king, who ruled for just 9 years before his mysterious death around 1324 BC, lay surrounded by everything his culture believed he'd need for the afterlife. Chariots disassembled for the journey, jars of wine still sealed, even garlands of flowers so delicate they crumbled at a touch. Each object offered an intimate glimpse into a civilization's deepest beliefs. Then came the whispers of the curse. When several members of Carter's team died unexpectedly, newspapers spun tales of a pharaoh's vengeance. In reality, mold toxins in the ancient air, bad luck, and the relentless glare of public fascination. But that myth, paired with the tomb's sheer grandeur, cemented Tutankhamun's place in pop culture. More importantly, the discovery sparked a global Egyptology boom, proving that even a minor ruler's tomb could rewrite history, because hidden beneath the gold and glamour were clues, scrolls detailing forgotten rituals, artifacts hinting at trade routes, even evidence of Tutankhamun's contested lineage. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a doorway, one that swung open to reveal how much we still had to learn. But Tutankhamun's tomb held more than just golden treasures. It concealed the haunting secrets of the boy king's fragile body. Modern CT scans peeled back the layers of time, revealing a young man riddled with ailments. His left foot bore the telltale deformity of clubfoot, forcing him to walk with a cane, several of which were buried beside him. Genetic testing showed malaria parasites in his bloodstream, along with traces of a rare bone disorder that may have left him frail. Then there was the broken leg, so severe some experts believe it likely became infected, possibly contributing to his sudden death at just 18 or 19 years old. The mystery deepens when we examine his mummification. Unlike other pharaohs, Tutankhamun's heart was missing, replaced with a scarab amulet. His chest cavity showed signs of rushed embalming, with resin poured so thickly it scorched his flesh. Was this a botched preparation or something more sinister? Some speculate murder, pointing to a suspicious fracture at the base of his skull. Others argue it was damage from Carter's team handling the mummy. The truth may never be fully known, but one thing's certain. This was no majestic ruler cut down in his prime. He was a vulnerable young man, preserved through time as much by his ailments as by his gold. Then came the tantalizing possibility that KV-62 still hadn't given up all its secrets. In 2015, radar scans detected anomalies behind the tomb's painted walls, voids that could be hidden chambers. The most electrifying theory, that one might hold the lost burial of Queen Nefertiti, Tutankhamun's stepmother and one of ancient Egypt's most powerful women. For a brief moment, the world held its breath. Could the ultimate archaeological jackpot lie just inches beyond those decorated walls? Subsequent scans proved inconclusive, leaving Egyptologists bitterly divided. Some insist the evidence points to undiscovered rooms, while others dismiss it as natural fissures in the bedrock. What makes this debate so compelling is how it reflects our changing relationship with ancient tombs. A century ago, archaeologists smashed through walls without a second thought. Today, we use non-invasive scanners, agonizing over whether to risk damaging priceless art for potential discoveries. Tutankhamun's tomb reminds us that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't the glittering objects we can hold, but the lingering questions that push us to keep searching. Behind every answer lies another mystery, waiting patiently in the dark. While Tutankhamun's tomb revealed the intimate struggles of a single ruler, another discovery half a world away exposed the staggering ambition of an emperor who commanded thousands of lives, even in death. In March 1974, a farmer digging a well in China's Shaanxi province struck something far stranger than water, a clay head, its painted eyes staring blankly up through the dirt. What he'd found was no solitary artifact, but the outer guard of history's most astonishing necropolis, the Terracotta army of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor to unify China. Archaeologists would soon uncover row upon row of life-sized warriors, each painstakingly crafted with unique facial features, hairstyles, even wrinkles. Cavalrymen stood beside archers, charioteers flanked infantry, an entire military division frozen in time, protecting their ruler's sealed tomb 2,200 years after his death. But the scale is what truly defies belief. Current estimates suggest over 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, and 670 horses occupy these underground corridors, with artisans signing their names on each figure like some ancient assembly line. Qin Shi Huang's obsession with immortality shaped every aspect of this mausoleum. Historical texts describe mercury rivers simulating the Yellow and Yangtze, meant to flow eternally around his burial chamber. Modern soil tests revealed mercury levels 60 times higher than normal near the tomb's center, evidence that these legends may hold truth. Yet the emperor's own burial mound remains unopened, protected not just by booby traps described in ancient scrolls, but by China's cautious preservation policies. What secrets might that central chamber hold? Imperial records hint at ceilings inlaid with pearls mimicking constellations, crossbow traps ready to fire, and treasures that would dwarf even Tutankhamun's gold. But until technology allows safe exploration, the Terracotta army will keep their silent watch, a clay battalion guarding mysteries we can only imagine. The decision to leave Qin Shi Huang's burial chamber untouched isn't just about respect for the dead. It's a high-stakes calculation balancing preservation against potential catastrophe. Modern archaeologists face a dilemma their predecessors never considered: how to explore without destroying. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed the emperor's tomb as a sprawling underground palace, its walls possibly lined with deadly crossbows still cocked after 22 centuries. But the real danger might be invisible ancient mercury pools, described in historical texts as rivers of silver, could vaporize the moment fresh air breaches the chamber, poisoning anyone inside and corroding priceless artifacts in seconds. China's caution stems from bitter experience. When the Terracotta warriors were first excavated, their vibrant mineral paints flaked off within minutes of exposure to oxygen, leaving the muted earthen hues we see today. Imagine that same tragedy unfolding on a grander scale: silk banners dissolving, lacquer turning to dust, even the emperor's remains potentially crumbling before scientists could study them. Current technology simply can't guarantee such delicate materials would survive. Yet the glimpses we do have are tantalizing. Muon detectors, a kind of cosmic ray imaging, suggest the tomb contains entire underground palaces and towers mirroring Qin Shi Huang's imperial capital. Some scans show metallic anomalies that could be bronze chariots or weapons caches, while others detect strange void patterns hinting at architectural traps. One controversial theory even proposes an early form of mechanical defense system: stone slabs designed to drop and crush intruders, activated by pressure plates in the floor. The waiting game continues as scientists develop new methods. Robotic probes with climate-controlled chambers, advanced 3D mapping drones, even molecular-level stabilization gels are all being tested for future excavations. Because this isn't just about uncovering treasure, it's about rewriting history without losing a single irreplaceable clue to carelessness. Every year of delay means better tools, smarter techniques, and a greater chance that when we finally step into that dark chamber, we'll do it right. Beneath the flawless limestone casing that once made the Great Pyramid gleam like a beacon in the desert, lies a labyrinth of mysteries modern science is only beginning to unravel. While tourists stream through the Grand Gallery and Burial Chamber, few realize that hidden passageways, some no wider than a toaster, zigzag through millions of tons of stone, their purpose lost to time. In 2017, a team using cosmic ray imaging made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the archaeological world: a massive void nearly 100 feet long, lurking undiscovered above the Grand Gallery. Dubbed the Big Void, this hollow space defies easy explanation. Was it a structural relief chamber to distribute the pyramid's crushing weight, a hidden treasury? Or something far more intriguing tied to the pharaoh's journey to the stars? Ancient Egyptian texts describe the afterlife as a celestial voyage, with the king's soul navigating secret pathways to join the sun god Ra. The pyramid's 4 narrow shafts, 2 pointing toward Orion's belt, 2 aligned with the North Star, hint at this sacred astronomy. Some researchers believe these weren't just symbolic. They may have functioned as literal conduits for the pharaoh's spirit, with the newly discovered void serving as a ritual chamber where his soul prepared for ascent. Others argue it's simply an engineering feature, noting how similar voids exist in other pyramids to prevent collapse. Then there's the enigma of the pyramid's missing treasures. Unlike Tutankhamun's lavish burial, Khufu's sarcophagus was found empty, its lid missing. Grave robbers could explain it, except the pyramid's intricate blocking system suggests no intruder ever reached the inner chambers. Some fringe theorists propose the void conceals Khufu's true burial site, untouched for 46 centuries. Mainstream Egyptologists dismiss this, yet the debate underscores a humbling truth. We've studied the Great Pyramid for centuries, but its deepest secrets still lie beyond our grasp. Modern technology keeps peeling back layers. Thermal scans showed temperature anomalies in certain limestone blocks, pockets of air or different materials. Robots with fiber optic cameras have navigated the southern shaft, only to find a small door with copper handles. Behind it, more unanswered questions. Each discovery feeds the pyramid's enduring legend, proving that even the world's most studied monument holds whispers of the unknown. What makes Khufu's tomb timeless isn't just its grandeur, but its refusal to surrender all its mysteries, reminding us that the past always keeps a few cards close to its chest. While the pyramids and pharaohs dominate Egypt's archaeological fame, a lesser-known oasis hides a necropolis so vast it redefined our understanding of Greco-Roman death rituals. In 1996, a donkey stumbled near Bahariya Oasis, its hoof crashing through the roof of a tomb, unleashing a sight that would leave archaeologists speechless. Beneath the sand sprawled a network of burial chambers so dense, experts dubbed it the Valley of the Golden Mummies. Over 10,000 bodies lay interred here, many adorned with gilded masks that shimmered eerily in the flashlight beams after 2 millennia of darkness. What makes this find so extraordinary isn't just the scale, but the cultural collision it represents. These weren't traditional Egyptian mummies, they bore the stylistic fingerprints of Greek and Roman rulers who'd conquered Egypt centuries after the pyramids were built. Some masks depicted serene, idealized faces in classical European styles. Others showed Egyptian gods like Anubis guarding the deceased in hybrid artistic traditions. Families were buried together in multi-level apartment tombs, their wealth displayed through golden jewelry, imported glassware, even preserved figs placed as offerings. The real puzzle: why here? Bahariya was a remote outpost, not a political or religious hub. One theory points to its thriving wine trade. Amphorae found in tombs still bore traces of vintage grapes. Another suggests a catastrophic epidemic necessitated mass burials, hinted at by the sheer density of bodies, but the most tantalizing clue lies in the mummies themselves. CT scans revealed many died young, with bone deformities suggesting generations of inbreeding among wealthy merchant families who'd isolated themselves in this desert refuge. Perhaps the most haunting detail is how the gilding was applied. Unlike Tutankhamun's solid gold mask, these were plaster casts covered in gold leaf, a democratization of the afterlife where middle-class traders could mimic pharaonic splendor. When conservators lifted one mask, they found the imprint of a child's eyelashes preserved in the plaster underneath, a fleeting human moment frozen beneath the grandeur. This valley forces us to rewrite history, proving that Egypt's burial customs didn't fade with the pharaohs. They evolved, adapted, and in this forgotten oasis achieved a golden afterlife of their own. Deep in the arid coastal plains of northern Peru, where the Moche people once flourished between 100 and 800 AD, a tomb lay hidden beneath layers of adobe bricks, waiting to rewrite the narrative of pre-Columbian civilization. When archaeologist Walter Alva arrived in 1987 to investigate looted artifacts near the village of Sipán, he couldn't have known his team was about to uncover the America's answer to Tutankhamun, the Lord of Sipán, a warrior priest buried in a blaze of gold, turquoise, and human sacrifice. The moment workers brushed away the final layer of dirt, sunlight struck a sight that still gives historians chills: a skeleton adorned with a crescent-shaped headdress of hammered gold, his face covered by a mask of snarling feline features. Necklaces of peanut-sized gold beads draped his chest, each peanut a sacred Moche symbol, meticulously crafted to honor agricultural abundance. His hands clutched scepters topped with silver cups, representing his dual role as military leader and spiritual conduit. But what sealed this tomb's significance were the companions buried alongside him. A warrior with amputated feet, possibly to prevent him from leaving his post in the afterlife. 2 young women in ceremonial garb, even a guard dog adorned with a copper necklace. This wasn't just a burial, it was a meticulously staged crossing into eternity. Comparisons to Tutankhamun's tomb are inevitable, but the contrasts are just as revealing. While Tutankhamun's gold served as royal insulation for the afterlife, Sipán's treasures functioned as literal cosmic maps. His ear spools weren't mere jewelry. They depicted mock deities mid-ritual with movable gold parts that would have shimmered as he walked. The most startling parallel, both rulers were interred with objects of daily life. Tut with his chariots, Sipán with his spondylus shells used in ritual bloodletting ceremonies. Yet where Tut's tomb reflects Egyptian obsession with preserving the body, Sipán's ensemble embraces decay. His skeleton was intentionally rearranged post-decomposition, suggesting the mock viewed the afterlife as a transformative process rather than static preservation. Modern technology peeled back even deeper layers. CT scans revealed the Lord suffered from chronic arthritis, likely from kneeling during prolonged ceremonies. Isotope analysis of his teeth traced his childhood diet to the distant highlands, proving the mock's vast trade networks, but the most haunting discovery. Sacrificial victims buried in layers above his chamber showed identical genetic mutations, close relatives, possibly offered to accompany him as an act of twisted devotion. This tomb forces us to confront a civilization that blended artistic sophistication with ritual violence, where a ruler's passage to the gods demanded not just gold but blood. What makes Sipán extraordinary is how it shattered colonial myths of pre-Columbian primitiveness. The metallurgy here surpassed contemporary European techniques. Mock artisans mastered electrochemical plating to bond gold and silver centuries before the Industrial Revolution. When conservators examined a tiny golden spider pendant, they found its abdomen hollow, filled with mercury that would have made it writhe in a priest's hands during ceremonies. Such ingenuity, buried for 1,600 years, rewrote history's timeline, proving the Americas had their own pharaohs, their own genius, their own golden road to the divine. Buried beneath a grassy mound in northern Greece, a tomb sealed for over 2,300 years sparked one of archaeology's fiercest debates. When archaeologist Manolis Andronikos began excavating the Great Tumulus at Vergina in 1977, he uncovered a royal burial so opulent it could only belong to one dynasty, the family of Alexander the Great. But which king lay entombed within? The answer hinges on a collection of artifacts so personal they seem to whisper across the centuries. Miniature ivory portraits with hauntingly lifelike features, a gilded silver diadem still bearing the impression of its owner's skull, and a suit of armor that may have marched across continents. At the heart of the mystery lies the tomb's ceremonial shield. Fashioned from iron and clad in gold, its surface depicts a lion hunt, an activity that claimed the life of Philip II, Alexander's father, who was speared through the leg during a celebration. Forensic analysis of the bones in the tomb revealed a devastating injury to the right knee, complete with signs of chronic infection that would have left the man with a pronounced limp. Ancient historians like Plutarch described Philip's limp in vivid detail, corroborating the connection. But skeptics point to another clue, a golden larnax or burial chest, bearing the 16-pointed star of the Macedonian royal house. While Philip's emblem featured 12 points, some argue the design evolved over time. Then there are the portraits. Carved from delicate ivory, their faces peer up with astonishing realism. A middle-aged man with one eye milky from trauma. Philip lost an eye in battle. A woman with solemn features believed to be Alexander's mother Olympia's, even a young man whose strong jawline mirrors Alexander's coin profiles. These weren't generic representations, they showed specific individuals with distinguishing marks, as if the artist had known them intimately. The armor tells another story, a cuirass of iron scales so finely wrought it would have allowed near-total mobility in combat. Beside it lay greaves of unequal length, custom-fitted to compensate for the occupant's uneven gait. What tilts the scales toward Philip's identification is the timing. The tomb's construction aligns with Macedonia's late 4th century B. c. peak before Alexander's conquests flooded the kingdom with Persian gold. Its relatively modest proportions reflect Philip's era rather than the grandiose monuments of Alexander's successors. Even the burial customs fit. Philip was cremated, his bones carefully washed in wine and wrapped in purple cloth before interment, exactly as described in ancient texts. Yet dissenting scholars propose it might belong to Philip III, Alexander's half-brother, pointing to a ceremonial sword whose blade shows signs of ritual breaking, a practice associated with later funerals. Perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the tomb's unintended time capsule effect. When archaeologists lifted the larnax's lid, they found not just bones, but the lingering scent of myrrh and cassia, spices so precious they were worth their weight in gold during Philip's reign. This wasn't a posthumous tribute, it was a final act of intimacy, someone anointing a king they'd known in life. The tomb's treasures don't just showcase wealth, they capture the human details history books omit. That dent in the ceremonial helmet, likely from a battle wound, those silver dining vessels stained with residue of the last funeral feast. Every object feels touched by hands that mourned, making this debate about more than academic labels. It's about recognizing the flesh and blood man behind the legend, whether he's the conqueror who forged an empire or the father who shaped history's greatest general. Far from the golden masks of pharaohs and the terracotta legions of emperors, a different kind of tomb chills the bones, one where the dead weren't laid to rest but put on display. In the quiet marshes of Motala, Sweden, archaeologists unearthed a scene that turned our understanding of Mesolithic rituals upside down. 11 skulls, some impaled on wooden stakes, their hollow eye sockets staring blankly across 9,000 years of silence. This wasn't a burial, it was something far more unsettling. The details defy modern expectations. 2 of the skulls still had wooden stakes driven vertically through their craniums, the bone around the entry wounds worn smooth by time. Others showed deliberate fractures, their edges carefully smoothed, suggesting these injuries weren't from battle but from ritual repeated handling, perhaps even veneration. Most haunting of all, the remains of at least 9 individuals, men and women, adults and adolescents, clustered together in what was once a shallow lake. Their separated skulls and jawbones bore marks of meticulous defleshing, their tendons cut cleanly as if preparing them for some unfathomable purpose. What kind of ceremony required mounting human skulls like gruesome trophies? One theory points to ancestor worship, where the dead became guardians of the living. The lake itself offers clues. Mesolithic people often deposited offerings in water, believing liminal spaces bridged the physical and spiritual worlds. But the violence complicates things. Forensic analysis revealed healed trauma on several skulls, suggesting these individuals survived earlier attacks before meeting their final fate. Were they honored warriors, sacrificial victims, or enemies turned into perpetual warnings? The real shock came when genetic testing traced the skulls to a tight-knit group, possibly a single family line. This wasn't random violence, it was deeply personal. Some researchers propose these were revered elders, their skulls curated over generations as conduits to the divine. Others see darker implications, ritual killings meant to bind the community through shared trauma. The truth may lie in between. Found among the bones were tools made from animal bones and antlers, some stained with ochre, a pigment linked to life and rebirth. Even in their brutality, these acts might have been rooted in reverence, a way to harness the power of the dead for the living's survival. What lingers isn't just the horror of the stakes, but the intimacy of the act. Someone took the time to smooth the sharp edges of a broken skull. Someone else arranged the jawbones just so. These weren't anonymous victims, they were known, handled, kept. In a world without writing, without cities, these sunken skulls speak louder than any monument. They tell us that long before gold or glory, humanity understood 2 things: that the dead could be useful, and that memory, even terrifying memory, could be carved into bone. While Qin Shi Huang's Terracotta army captured the world's attention, another tomb just 30 miles away held secrets of a far more personal drama, one that reshaped China's imperial dynasty. In 2006, construction crews near Xi'an unearthed a burial chamber so lavish, archaeologists initially thought they'd found a second emperor's tomb. Golden horses, life-sized bronze swans, and jade artifacts worth kingdoms filled the space. But the real shock came when inscriptions identified the occupant, Lady Xia, grandmother of the first emperor himself, a woman history barely remembered until her opulent grave revealed the vicious power struggles that forged China. This wasn't just any noblewoman's resting place. The tomb's sheer extravagant silver and gold threads woven into her shroud, 15 chariots buried alongside her, matched imperial levels. Forensic analysis showed something darker. Lady Xia's bones bore marks of severe malnutrition in childhood, followed by a sudden shift to elite status in her teens. Historians now believe she was a concubine kidnapped from a rival state, forced into the Qin royal household as a political pawn. The jade hairpins and pearl-inlaid cosmetics buried with her tell two stories outward luxury, masking a life of calculated survival. Most telling are the bamboo slips found near her sarcophagus, their faded ink detailing poison recipes and antidotes. During her lifetime, Qin's court was a snake pit of assassinations and betrayals. Scholars speculate Lady Xia wielded subtle influence, possibly even protecting the young prince who'd become China's unifier. Her tomb's defensive architecture, false corridors, hidden trapdoors, suggests paranoia carried beyond death. One chilling detail, her burial chamber contained an extra, empty coffin sized for a child. Some interpret this as maternal devotion, others see a threat from rivals who murdered her descendants. What makes this discovery pivotal is how it rewrites Qin Shi Huang's origin story. The man who burned books and buried scholars alive may have inherited his ruthlessness from a grandmother who navigated court intrigues with poison and patience. Unlike the emperor's sterile mausoleum, Lady Xia's tomb feels human, the jade game pieces placed for eternity, the silver mirrors still reflecting nothing but darkness. Her grave goods don't glorify an empire, they whisper of a woman who played the deadliest game of all and one only to be erased by history until now. Modern technology peeled back more layers. CT scans revealed sealed ceramic jars containing traces of mercury, possibly the very toxins she'd used or feared. DNA from her teeth traced her origins to the Chu kingdom, confirming ancient texts that described Qin's royal family as half-blooded snakes. Yet for all its grandeur, the tomb carries one heartbreaking touch. Nestled among weapons and gold lay a simple pottery doll, its paint worn from handling. Whether it comforted a stolen child bride or a grieving grandmother, this fragile toy survived 2 millennia to remind us that behind every power struggle were people terrified, ambitious, and utterly human. In the rolling hills of southern Spain, where ancient Iberians once thrived, a tomb from the 4th century B.C. shattered assumptions about disability and power in the ancient world. When archaeologists carefully brushed away the dirt from a burial chamber in Castello, they uncovered a skeleton unlike any other, a woman laid to rest with her arms outstretched, each ending not in bone but in gleaming silver. These weren't ornaments, they were intricate prosthetic hands crafted with articulated joints that would have allowed her to grasp objects in life. The details of these silver hands reveal astonishing sophistication. X-rays showed hollow interiors lined with organic material, likely leather or wood, to cushion her residual limbs. The left hand clasped a pomegranate, symbolizing eternal life, while the right bore delicate etchings mimicking veins and fingernails. But what truly stunned researchers was the tomb's context. She was buried in a limestone sarcophagus, surrounded by amber necklaces from the Baltic, Egyptian scarabs, and a cosmetic kit with traces of frankincense. This wasn't just medical innovation, it was a statement of elite status. Scholars now face a tantalizing question: was her disability a source of stigma or strength? The lavishness of her burial suggests she held significant authority, perhaps as a priestess or ruler. Ancient texts describe Iberian women as healers and leaders, but physical perfection was often tied to power. Some theorize her prosthetics symbolized divine connection, like the silver arm of the Celtic god Nuada. Others point to stress fractures in her collarbones, evidence that she used these hands actively for years, possibly even riding horses or weaving sacred textiles. Then there's the mystery of how she lost her hands. No cuts or infections mark her arm bones, ruling out amputation or gangrene. One provocative theory suggests congenital absence, meaning she lived her entire life adapting to these silver replacements. The tomb's location adds another layer. Castello was a strategic crossroads where Greek, Phoenician, and Celtic cultures mingled. Her prosthetics may reflect techniques borrowed from seafaring traders who'd seen similar devices in Egypt or Mesopotamia. What lingers isn't just the craftsmanship, but the person behind the silver. Someone took painstaking care to mold those hands to her body. Someone chose symbols that honored her in death as she'd lived, not as broken but whole. In a world that often equated physical difference with weakness, this woman's tomb proclaims the opposite. That identity isn't worn on the body, but forged in how we choose to be remembered. In the shadow of Greece's Pangaean hills, a tomb so monumental it dwarfed even the burials of kings lay hidden beneath a tumulus for over 2,000 years. When archaeologists broke through the sealed entrance of the Amphipolis tomb in 2014, they weren't just uncovering a burial chamber, they were stepping into a labyrinth of artistry and intrigue that would ignite one of history's most heated debates. The first glimpse past the threshold revealed a pair of headless sphinxes, their wings spread protectively over the doorway, their marble bodies still bearing traces of crimson paint. Beyond them stretched a corridor lined with frescoed walls depicting chariots and warriors, leading to a vaulted chamber where a mosaic of staggering beauty covered the floor. Persephone's abduction by Hades, each tessera shimmering as if wet with the tears of the underworld. The scale alone defied logic. This wasn't some provincial noble's grave. The mound measured 500 meters in circumference, making it the largest ancient tomb ever discovered in Greece. The engineering was equally jaw-dropping. Limestone blocks weighing tons fitted together with precision that rivaled the Parthenon, all buried under 40 feet of earth. But the real mystery lay in the tomb's empty sarcophagus. Whoever built this marvel had gone to extraordinary lengths to protect nothing, or had they? Fragments of cremated bones found in the vault's inner chamber set off a firestorm of speculation. Could these be the remains of Olympias, Alexander the Great's formidable mother, who met a brutal end after her son's death? Ancient sources describe her being stoned by relatives of those she'd executed, her body denied proper burial for years. The tomb's proximity to Amphipolis, a city loyal to her, and its construction date around 317 B.C. fit the timeline. Then there's the mosaic symbolism. Persephone's myth mirrors Olympia's own story, a powerful woman dragged unwillingly into death. But another theory gripped historians even tighter. The tomb's layout mirrors descriptions of Hephaestion's funeral monument, Alexander's childhood friend, general, and rumored lover. When Hephaestion died suddenly in Ecbatana, Alexander reportedly spent a fortune on his pyre, commissioning artworks and temples in his honor. The Amphipolis mosaics include a hunting scene eerily similar to one described in ancient texts as decorating Hephaestion's shrine. More tellingly, the tomb's architectural flourishes blend Macedonian and Persian styles, just as Alexander had begun merging cultures before his death. The controversies don't end there. Why was the tomb deliberately sealed with thousands of tons of sand, as if to deter even the most determined grave robbers? Why do some walls show evidence of hasty repairs, suggesting structural collapses during construction? And most perplexing of all, why does the skeletal analysis point to 5 individuals, not one? A woman over 60, two men in their prime, a newborn, and a cremated adult of indeterminate sex. Were these family members sacrifices or later intrusions? Modern technology has only deepened the puzzle. Ground-penetrating radar reveals undiscovered chambers beneath the main vault, possibly plundered in antiquity. Spectroscopy of the pigment's uncovered Egyptian blue, a prestige import suggesting royal patronage. Even the Sphinx's guard secrets. Their missing heads may have been deliberately removed, not looted, to blind them from witnessing some ritual or desecration. What makes Amphipolis extraordinary isn't just its grandeur, but how it reflects the chaos of an empire unraveling. Built during the wars of the successors, when Alexander's generals tore his world apart, this tomb could be a last gasp of unity, a monument to someone who mattered so profoundly. Even amidst the bloodshed, they warranted a masterpiece. Whether it cradled a queen, a general, or another figure entirely, one truth remains: in death as in life, the shadow of Alexander looms large, and the earth still guards his secrets fiercely. Imagine a burial so extravagant, the dead were dressed for eternity in a shimmering second skin, not of gold but of jade, a stone the ancient Chinese believed could conquer decay itself. In 1968, deep within the Mancheng district's limestone hills, archaeologists discovered Prince Liu Sheng's tomb untouched after 2,000 years, its most astonishing treasure not piled in chests but stitched onto his corpse, a suit composed of 2,498 rectangular jade plaques, each drilled with tiny holes and woven together with threads of gold. This wasn't mere ornamentation, it was alchemy. The Han Dynasty elite clung to the idea that jade possessed mystical properties, capable of preserving flesh indefinitely when placed against the body. Texts from the era describe how nobles drank powdered jade elixirs and placed plaques over their eyes, noses, and ears to seal the soul inside. Liu Sheng's suit took this belief to its logical extreme, encasing him head to toe in a mineral cocoon. Every detail served ritual purpose. The plaques over his chest cut thicker to shield his heart, those along his fingers tapered for flexibility, even his groin protected by interlocking trapezoidal pieces. But the true engineering marvel lay in the threading. Microscopic analysis revealed the gold wires weren't just decorative, they were tensile, allowing the suit to flex slightly as attendants dressed the prince's corpse. Some strands showed where patterns suggesting the suit was adjusted multiple times during funeral preparations, as if fine-tuning his immortality. The craftsmanship bordered on obsession. Each plaque's edges were beveled to prevent chafing against the others, and the jade itself, imported from cotton thousands of miles away, was hand-selected for its milky translucence, believed to glow faintly in the presence of the soul. Why go to such lengths? The answer lies in Huanglao Taoism, the Han court's dominant philosophy, which taught that physical preservation equaled spiritual survival. Jade suits were the ultimate insurance policy, a way to cheat the underworld's bureaucracy by presenting a body so pristine, death's clerks might mistake it for living. Later dynasties mocked the practice as wasteful superstition, but the Han nobility doubled down. Emperor Wu reportedly commissioned a suit with 5,000 pieces, its threading of silver to denote his higher rank, gold for princes, silver for lesser nobles, silk for aristocrats. Modern science exposes the heartbreaking irony. Far from preventing decay, the suits accelerated it. The airtight jade created a humid microclimate where bacteria thrived, leaving behind only stained bones and verdigris-crusted threads. Yet in their failure, these suits succeed as something rarer, an artifact of absolute faith. When conservators lifted Liu Sheng's chest plate, they found not a mummy, but a handful of dust and a single molar, still clinging to a fragment of gold wire like a final, stubborn claim on eternity. What resonates isn't just the extravagance, but the intimacy. Someone spent months, perhaps years, drilling those infinitesimal holes, someone else knotting each thread with prayers. The suit's weight alone, 27 pounds for Liu Sheng's, would have made movement impossible in life, but in death it became a kind of freedom, an aristocrat's defiant gamble that wealth could buy what no one had ever owned: more time. For centuries, Rome's first emperor rested in a tomb that seemed almost mocking in its modesty, a crumbling, weed-choked cylinder overshadowed by later rulers' grand monuments. The mausoleum of Augustus, built in 28 B.C., when the emperor was just 35, stands as a paradox, the burial place of a man who reshaped the ancient world, yet deliberately smaller and plainer than the tombs of his successors. Recent restorations have peeled back layers of neglect, revealing a structure that tells us as much about Augustus' calculated humility as his absolute power. The mausoleum's original design was deceptively simple, a series of concentric earthen rings topped by cypress trees, with a modest bronze plaque bearing his self-penned epitaph: "I found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble." No grand statues, no golden sarcophagus, just those words carved with the same quiet precision that defined his 40-year reign. Yet this restraint was itself a masterstroke of propaganda. By rejecting the excesses of earlier rulers like Julius Caesar's ostentatious tomb in the Forum, Augustus positioned himself as Rome's dutiful servant rather than its dictator. The mausoleum's very location reinforced this, built not on the sacred Palatine Hill, but in the Campus Martius, a public space where citizens could gather. The real shock comes when comparing it to later imperial tombs. Hadrian's sprawling mausoleum, now the Castel Sant'Angelo, dwarfs Augustus' resting place, while Maxentius' 4th-century circus tomb complex on the Appian Way makes the first emperor's burial seem almost quaint. This wasn't an accident of history, it was Augustus' genius. He understood that true power in Rome didn't come from towering monuments, but from controlling the narrative. His mausoleum became a stage for ritual, a place where yearly sacrifices reinforced his cult, where processions kept his memory alive. The building's deterioration after Rome's fall feels almost poetic. By the Middle Ages, it had become a quarry, its marble stripped for churches. In the 1930s, Mussolini turned it into a concert hall, plastering fascist symbols over Augustan brickwork. Modern restorations have uncovered fascinating details. LiDAR scans show the original entrance aligned precisely with the Aura Passus Augustus altar of peace, so the sunset on his birthday would illuminate both monuments simultaneously. Soil analysis revealed the tomb's earthen mounds were planted with sacred herbs, their scent masking decay during funerals. Most poignant is the small underground chamber where Augustus' ashes rested beside those of his failed heirs, Marcellus, dead at 19, Gaius and Lucius, gone before 30. This was less a celebration of empire than a family crypt, a reminder that even history's most calculating ruler couldn't outwit mortality, the Restoration's greatest revelation. Augustus outplayed his successors after all. While their gargantuan tombs became museums or fortresses, his modest cylinder has endured as something far more powerful, a blank slate. Every generation projects its own ideals onto it. Renaissance humanists saw republican virtue, Napoleon's archaeologists imagined imperial grandeur, and today's visitors find irony in a dictator's unassuming grave. The mausoleum's true genius lies in its emptiness. By saying so little, Augustus ensured we'd never stop talking about him. High in the arid mountains of Peru, where the Andes carve razor-sharp ridges into the sky, a burial chamber sealed for 12 centuries told a story history had forgotten. In 2012, archaeologists brushing away centuries of dust uncovered something extraordinary. A noblewoman of the Wari Empire, her skeletal hands clutching a golden ceremonial axe, a silver goblet resting near her skull, and her skull itself crowned with a headdress of hammered gold. This wasn't just any burial, this was the tomb of the Wari queen, and her grave goods spoke a language of power that forced us to rewrite everything we thought we knew about pre-Inca civilizations. What made this discovery so revolutionary were the objects surrounding her. Unlike the typical burials of noblewomen in later Inca society, often adorned with textiles and pottery, this tomb contained tools of authority. Golden ear flares the size of drink coasters marked her elite status, while miniature gold knives and weaving implements suggested she controlled both ritual and craft production. The real shock came when researchers found a ceremonial war club beside her, its handle wrapped in delicate silver wire. Here was a woman not just of status but of command, possibly a priestess queen who wielded both spiritual and military influence during the Wari Empire's peak between 600 and 1100 AD. The tomb's location added another layer of intrigue. Buried beneath a towering adobe pyramid at the site of El Castillo de Huame, she was surrounded by 58 other high-status women, some seated in upright positions as if guarding her in death. Forensic analysis revealed these women came from different regions of the empire, their bones showing varied diets and genetic markers. This wasn't a family crypt, it was a carefully curated assembly of power, possibly regional leaders or priestesses united in service to the queen. One artifact in particular rewrote assumptions about gender roles in the ancient Andes, a backstrap loom. Its wooden frame long decayed, but its gold and silver fittings still intact. Modern weavers who examined the pieces confirmed its design matched those still used today for creating intricate ceremonial textiles. In Wari culture, textiles weren't just clothing, they were maps of cosmology, political treaties, and records of history. A woman who controlled their production held immense influence, possibly even serving as the empire's living memory. The presence of coca leaves and spondylus shells, sacred materials in Andean rituals, suggests she may have presided over ceremonies bridging the human and divine world. The most haunting detail emerged when scientists reconstructed her face from skeletal remains. Unlike the idealized portraits of Egyptian queens, her features were unsoftened by artistic convention. A strong jaw, broad cheekbones, and a healed fracture above one eye socket that hinted at a life far from pampered leisure. Isotope analysis of her teeth revealed she'd traveled extensively across the empire's highlands and coast, likely to maintain alliances or oversee rituals. This was no figurehead, she'd earned her scars. What lingers isn't just the gold or the grandeur, but the quiet subversion of expectations. For centuries, scholars assumed pre-Columbian societies mirrored the male-dominated structures recorded by Spanish chroniclers. The Wari Queen's tomb forces us to reconsider that perhaps the Andes once knew a different kind of power, one where a woman could be buried with the tools of war and the instruments of creation. Her legacy woven not just in thread, but in the very foundations of an empire that paved the way for the Inca. Her silent bones shout across the centuries, reminding us that history often hides its most revolutionary stories in the unlikeliest of places. Beneath the rolling green hills of southern Germany, where the Danube River cuts through fertile valleys, a team of archaeologists in 2010 uncovered a burial that shattered long-held beliefs about early Celtic society. The woman they found later, dubbed the Celtic Princess of Huneberg, lay in a larch wood chamber beneath an earthen mound, her bones surrounded by treasures that spoke of connections stretching far beyond the forests of Europe. Around her neck rested a delicate torque of twisted gold wire, its ends tipped with amber from the Baltic. Near her feet stood an ornate bronze cauldron, its handles shaped like winged goddesses in a style unmistakably Greek. But the real astonishment came when they brushed dirt from a cluster of small jars. Their ceramic analysis revealed they'd once held wine flavored with resins from the Eastern Mediterranean, likely sipped from the Attic drinking cups found beside her. This wasn't just a wealthy noblewoman's grave, it was a smoking gun. For decades, historians had assumed the Celts of this era, living around 600 BC, were isolated tribes, their world limited to local trade routes. The princess's tomb proved otherwise. Every object told a story of astonishing mobility. Sicilian coral inlaid in her brooches, Etruscan silk fragments clinging to bronze pins, even traces of frankincense that could only have come from the Arabian Peninsula. These weren't random trinkets gathered through trickle-down trade. They were curated luxuries suggesting she or her people had direct access to merchant networks spanning the continent. The Huenberg hill fort where she was buried adds another layer to the mystery. Recent excavations show its mud-brick walls, unprecedented in Central Europe, were modeled after Mediterranean architecture, complete with bastions and gates resembling those in Greece. Chemical analysis of the princess's teeth confirms she grew up locally, meaning she didn't bring these treasures from afar. They were brought to her. Some scholars now argue Huenberg wasn't some backwater chieftain's stronghold, but a bustling node along a Celtic Silk Road, where amber, tin, and slaves moved south in exchange for wine, oils, and art. Yet the tomb's most revealing detail isn't its gold or imports, but the way they were arranged. The Greek cup sat near her head as if ready for a toast in the afterlife. The Etruscan comb still held strands of her hair dyed reddish-brown with plant extracts. Even the orientation of her body, facing southeast toward the distant Mediterranean, felt intentional. This wasn't haphazard wealth display. It was a carefully staged farewell, blending Celtic and foreign traditions into something entirely new. Modern reconstructions of her face, based on skull measurements, show high cheekbones and a determined jawline. Isotope studies hint at a protein-rich diet of meat and dairy, far above typical Iron Age fare. But what lingers isn't just her privileged life, it's the questions she forces us to ask. Was she a diplomat's daughter, married to seal an alliance with traders from the south, a priestess mediating between local and foreign gods? Or perhaps evidence of something even more provocative, that the Celts weren't the barbarians Roman texts would later paint them as, but savvy participants in a connected ancient world, their elites as cosmopolitan as any Athenian merchant prince. The Huenberg princess challenges us to rethink the map of 6th century Europe, not as isolated cultures separated by mountains and prejudice, but as a web of highways where ideas, art, and power flowed as freely as wine from those shattered jars. Her tomb doesn't just hold bones and gold, it holds a reminder that globalization isn't a modern invention. It's as ancient as human ambition. Perched 200 feet above a roaring river in northern Peru, clinging to a sheer limestone cliff like silent sentinels, the sarcophagi of the Chachapoya people stare defiantly across the centuries. When archaeologists first documented these painted burial pods in 1996, they uncovered more than a tomb. They found a manifesto carved in clay and bones. Known as the Warriors of the Clouds, the Chachapoya constructed these eerie coffins not in the safety of the earth, but in the most perilous place imaginable, as if to declare, even in death we bow to no one. Each sarcophagus stands over 6 feet tall, their surfaces once brightly painted with geometric patterns and human faces, now faded by wind and rain. Shaped like stylized human figures with broad shoulders and narrow waists, they were crafted from clay mixed with straw and pebbles, then hardened in the sun before being hauled up the cliff, an engineering feat that still baffles experts. Inside, the dead were seated in the fetal position, wrapped in layers of textiles, surrounded by offerings, copper bracelets, carved wooden idols, even gourds filled with food for the journey ahead. But the most telling detail, many skulls showed signs of healed battle injuries, their bones bearing the marks of a people who lived and died by the sword. This wasn't just a burial custom, it was a middle finger to history. The Chachapoya flourished between 800 and 1500 AD, building fortress cities in the cloud forests that the Inca later described as impossible to conquer. When the empire finally subjugated them after decades of war, the cloud people's resistance didn't end. Their cliffside tombs became acts of rebellion, burying their dead where no Inca could reach them, in places so treacherous even looters wouldn't dare. Some sarcophagi face east toward the rising sun and their ancestral lands. Others glare west toward Cusco, the Inca capital, as if watching for the next invasion. Then came the real mystery. By the time Spanish chroniclers arrived in the 16th century, the Chachapoya had vanished, not defeated, not assimilated, gone. No records explain whether they were wiped out by disease, scattered in rebellion, or simply melted into the mountains they'd always called home. Modern DNA studies add to the puzzle. Descendants still live in the region, yet their oral traditions speak only vaguely of the ancient ones. The cliff tombs hold one last secret. In 2018, laser scans revealed hidden chambers behind some sarcophagi, narrow tunnels leading deeper into the rock. Were these spirit pathways, storage niches, or bolt holes for some final stand? We may never know. What remains is the image of those painted figures, arms crossed like warriors even in eternity, their eyeless faces turned toward the void. They built their graves where eagles fear to fly, and in doing so left a message carved not in stone but in thin air. Some cultures refuse to be erased, even when the world forgets their names. Deep within the temple of the inscriptions at Palenque, where the humid air clings to ancient stone like a second skin, archaeologists in 1994 uncovered a burial that redefined our understanding of Maya power structures. The moment their flickering lights pierced the darkness of Tomb 16, they gasped, not just at the treasure but at the color. Every surface, from the skeletal remains to the jade ornaments, glowed an unearthly red, dusted with powdered cinnabar so thick it pooled like blood in the torchlight. This was the tomb of the Red Queen, and her crimson shroud was just the beginning of the mystery. The woman likely in her 60s when she died around 600 AD. Rested beneath a jade mosaic mask so intricate, its tesserae still held the imprint of the artisan's fingers. Necklaces of jade beads the size of olives draped her collarbones, while spondylus shells from distant oceans cradled her hips. But what stunned scholars wasn't the opulence, it was the location. She lay just meters from King Pakal the Great's legendary sarcophagus, in a temple previously assumed reserved for male rulers. The glyphs nearby named her as Lady Ixtiziakbu Ajor, Pakal's wife, but the burial's extravagance hinted at something more, a co-ruler, not just a consort. Forensic analysis added layers to the puzzle. Her bones showed signs of childhood malnutrition followed by decades of elite status, perhaps a political marriage that elevated her from hardship to power. The cinnabar wasn't merely decorative. Maya texts described the scarlet pigment as the blood of the earth, a sacred substance believed to animate the dead. Someone had taken extraordinary care to ensure her vitality in the afterlife, pouring pounds of the mercury-rich mineral over her body like a second skin. Even more telling, the presence of a ceremonial stingray spine, a tool used by Maya royals for bloodletting rituals. This wasn't just a queen, she may have pierced her own tongue to summon visions, communing with gods as equals to her husband. The tomb's architecture whispered secrets too. Unlike Pakal's grandiose crypt with its cosmic carvings, the Red Queen's chamber was intimate, its walls unadorned except for a single glyph cluster. Some epigraphers interpret this as humility, others as a silent protest that her power needed no stone accolades. The most electrifying theory emerged when researchers noticed her sarcophagus's alignment. Positioned so the first dawn light of the winter solstice would ignite the cinnabar into fiery brilliance, bathing her remains in living light. Modern science peeled back even deeper layers. Residue on her teeth contained traces of theobromine, proof she drank ceremonial cacao daily, a privilege reserved for elites. DNA analysis revealed she shared no bloodline with Pakal, shattering assumptions about Maya dynastic marriages. And that jade mask, source tracking showed its stones came from Guatemala's Motagua Valley, 400 kilometers away, transported through alliances or conquests we've yet to uncover. What lingers isn't just the Red Queen's opulence, but her quiet subversion. In a civilization where male rulers monopolized the historical record, her tomb screams a different truth. That behind every great king may have stood a greater queen, her hands not just holding scepter, but perhaps the pen that wrote history itself. The cinnabar has faded now, but the message remains: power in Palinque wore many hues. Beneath the olive groves of Pylos, where the whispers of Homer's epic still linger in the salty Mediterranean air, a team of archaeologists in 2015 uncovered a grave so packed with riches, it single-handedly rewrote our understanding of Bronze Age Greece. Dubbed the Griffin Warrior for the mythical beast adorned ivory plaque resting on his chest, this Mycenaean nobleman lay surrounded by over 1,500 artifacts, a hoard so lavish, it blurred the line between trade and conquest, between ally and overlord. The moment the first golden cup gleamed through the dirt, the team knew this wasn't just another noble burial. Nestled beside the warrior's skeleton were weapons of war and objects of astonishing artistry. A bronze sword with an ivory hilt so finely carved, its spirals seemed to move in the flickering lamplight. A suit of boar's tusk armor, its plates painstakingly cut from dozens of tusks and stitched together with leather now long decayed. But the real revelation lay in the grave's quieter corners: 50 Minoan seal stones, their intricate carvings depicting bull leapers and goddesses, their craftsmanship so refined they could only have come from the workshops of Knossos. Here's where the story twists. The Griffin Warrior died around 1500 BC, a time when Mycenaean Greece was thought to be a cultural backwater compared to the dazzling Minoan palaces of Crete. Yet his tomb screams otherwise. Those seal stones weren't looted war prizes, they showed no signs of violence or mishandling. Instead, they were arranged with care, some placed near his head as if to guide him in the afterlife. Even more telling, the presence of raw materials: uncarved blocks of lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, amber from the Baltic, suggesting this warrior wasn't just a consumer of Minoan goods, but perhaps a patron, his wealth funding the very artisans who created them. Then there's the jewelry. 4 golden rings rested on his chest, their bezels depicting scenes so Minoan in style. They could have been ripped from Cretan frescoes: goddesses flanked by griffins, ships sailing beneath crescent moons. But the alloy told a different story. The gold's chemical signature matched Mycenaean mines, not Cretan ones. Had Minoan craftsmen relocated to the Greek mainland, bringing their techniques with them? Or had Mycenaean nobles so coveted Minoan prestige that they commissioned knockoffs? The answer might lie in the warrior's own ancestry. Isotope analysis of his teeth revealed he grew up locally, yet his burial customs, like the placement of a bronze mirror near his feet, echoed Cretan rituals. The tomb's piece de resistance, a single ivory comb, its teeth still holding strands of his hair after 35 centuries. When scientists extracted proteins from those strands, they found traces of aromatic oils, likely imported from the Levant. This warrior wasn't just wealthy, he was cosmopolitan, his daily life a tapestry of influences stretching across the ancient world. His grave goods whisper of a time when the Aegean wasn't a patchwork of rival kingdoms, but an interconnected network where art, ideas, and power flowed as freely as the wine in those golden cups. What makes this discovery revolutionary isn't just the treasure, but what it implies about Mycenae's rise. For decades, historians assumed the Mycenaeans conquered Crete, absorbing its culture through violence. The Griffin Warrior's tomb suggests something subtler: an era of collaboration, even admiration, before the palaces burned. His burial is a snapshot of a moment when two great civilizations stood not as conqueror and conquered, but as partners in a dance of gold and sea spray. Their legacies intertwined so tightly, we're only now beginning to untangle the threads. Beneath the scorching Luxor sun, where the Nile's waters once nourished a civilization obsessed with eternity, archaeologists in 2017 peeled back layers of sand to reveal a necropolis so dense with history, it seemed to pulse with whispers of the past. The Tomb of the Nobles, a sprawling network of burial shafts hidden beneath the foothills of Dra Abu el Naga, yielded a staggering trove: over 1,000 statues, coffins, and mummies, each a frozen moment in Egypt's glittering golden age. But one discovery stole the spotlight. A woman named Thuya, her face concealed behind a radiant gold mask so pristine, it gleamed as if freshly polished for her journey to the afterlife. Thuya's mask wasn't just a funeral accessory, it was a technological marvel, crafted from beaten gold leaf over layers of linen and plaster. The delicate features, arched brows, full lips, almond eyes, were rendered with such precision they seemed to breathe. CT scans later revealed the face beneath, a woman in her 50s, her teeth worn from a diet of coarse bread, her bones showing signs of a life less pampered than the mask's opulence suggested. This juxtaposition told a story far richer than treasure. Thuya likely wasn't royalty, but a wealthy noblewoman or high priestess whose family spared no expense to align her with the gods. The mask's inner surface bore traces of resin infused with myrrh, a sacred material believed to purify the soul, proof that every material choice was a prayer cast in metal and scent. The tomb's true significance lay in its chaos. Unlike the orderly burials of pharaohs, this necropolis was a layered mosaic of generations. Wooden coffins stacked like firewood, their painted hieroglyphs still vibrant after 3,000 years, depicted scenes of harvests and feasts the deceased resume for the afterlife. Among them, a cluster of child mummies, each wrapped in linen threaded with blue faience beads, a color symbolizing rebirth, hinted at a tragic epidemic or familial devotion stretching beyond death. Statues of Tarsokar Osiris, the god of resurrection, stood guard beside baskets of withered figs, their seeds still clinging to the weave. Then came the puzzles. One mummy, labeled as a male scribe in hieratic script, was revealed by DNA testing to be a woman, an anomaly suggesting either ancient clerical errors or a female scribe's rare status. Another coffin, cracked open by looters centuries ago, contained not bones but a cache of folded letters to the dead, penned on pottery shards. One heartbreaking note read, "Mother, why have you not answered me? The baby is sick and the barley crop has failed." These weren't just artifacts, they were uncensored snapshots of grief, faith, and desperation, the most electrifying find. A sealed chamber hidden behind a false wall, its entrance choked with shattered canopic jars. Inside, a single alabaster vase held a blackened residue. Laboratory analysis identified it as a blend of cedar oil and beeswax, components of the legendary Moses incense described in biblical texts. This accidental time capsule confirmed what historians long suspected, that the nobles' necropolis wasn't just a graveyard, but a crossroads of trade, religion, and everyday humanity. The workers who buried Thuya might have inhaled that same incense as they sealed her tomb, its smoke curling into the desert air like a bridge between worlds. What makes this discovery timeless isn't the gold or the grandeur, but the intimacy. Thuya's mask reflects not just her face, but the hands that shaped it, the artisan who hammered each curve, the priest who anointed it, the mourners who wept as it was lowered into darkness. The nobles' necropolis forces us to see ancient Egypt not as a parade of pharaohs, but as a chorus of voices, merchants, mothers, scribes, and children, all clamoring to be remembered. In their silence, they speak volumes about fear, hope, and the universal hunger for a sliver of forever. Beneath the rich black soil of Norway's Oseberg farm, where the frost heaves and retreats with each passing winter, a shape lurked for over 1,000 years, a ghost of wood and iron waiting to tell its story. In 1904, a farmer's plow struck something unyielding, and soon archaeologists stood gaping at the prow of a Viking ship, its curves still sharp, its keel cradling the most opulent burial Scandinavia had ever seen. This was the Oseberg ship, and at its heart lay not a warrior king, but two women, their identities shrouded in as much mystery as the swirling Norse myths painted on the grave goods surrounding them. The elder woman's skeleton told a tale of privilege and pain. Forensic analysis revealed she was in her 70s or 80s, an extraordinary age for the Viking age, her bones marked by arthritis so severe she likely walked with a cane. Yet her burial was anything but frail. She wore a fine woolen dress with silk trim imported from the East, her fingers adorned with delicate rings. Beside her lay the younger woman, barely 30, her teeth oddly filed in horizontal grooves, a cosmetic practice found in some Viking remains, but never before in a woman of such apparent status. Their coffins rested beneath a mountain of offerings, elaborately carved wooden carts, tapestries depicting processions of Valkyries, even 15 slaughtered horses, their skulls split cleanly in a single blow, a testament to the funeral's brutal piety. But it was the smaller objects that ignited scholarly debate. Nestled among golden brooches and Byzantine silver coins lay a staff of oak, its tip shaped like a serpent's head. Similar staves appear in Norse sagas as the tools of Völva's sorceresses who practiced Seidr, a form of magic straddling prophecy and manipulation of fate. The sagas describe these women as both revered and feared, capable of foretelling wars or cursing kings. Was the older woman not just an aristocrat, but a spiritual powerhouse whose words could sway entire fleets? The presence of cannabis seeds and henbane plants linked to trance states in Viking rituals bolsters this theory. Then there's the ship itself, measuring 70 feet from stern to prow, its planks fastened with iron nails still gleaming faintly under the peat. It was built not for war but for prestige. The carvings along its rails depicted serpents swallowing their own tails, a symbol of cyclical power, while the mast step bore runes invoking Thor's protection. This was no mere coffin, it was a vessel for the dead to sail into the afterlife, stocked with everything from farming tools to a bucket of wild apples. Modern reconstructions of the women's faces only deepen the enigma. The elder's strong jawline and high cheekbones suggest a life of command, while the younger's filed teeth and unusual skull shape hint at origins far from Norway's fjords. Some scholars propose they were mother and daughter, others a priestess and her acolyte. The most radical theory that the elder was Queen Asa of the Ungling dynasty, a semi-legendary figure described in sagas as a cunning ruler who outlived her enemies through guile as much as strength. What lingers isn't just the opulence, but the defiance of expectations. In a culture famed for bearded warriors and dragon-headed longships, these women's burial shouts a different truth. That Viking power wore many faces, some lined with age, some sharp with filed teeth, all staring unblinking into the dark waters of history. The Oseberg ship didn't just carry corpses, it carried contradictions, daring us to rethink everything we assumed about whose voices mattered in the thunder of the North. And perhaps that's the real sorcery, not the staff or the seeds, but the way these women's silence still echoes louder than 1,000 swords. High in the Altai Mountains, where Russia's borders brush against Mongolia and Kazakhstan, a tomb sealed by permafrost for 2,500 years surrendered its secrets in 1993, revealing not a warrior king, but a woman frozen so perfectly in time her tattoos still gleamed like fresh ink. Known as the Siberian Ice Maiden or the Yukok Princess, her discovery wasn't just an archaeological triumph. It was a window into the Scythian world, where women rode, fought, and wielded spiritual power with a fierceness that defied ancient stereotypes. The moment archaeologists brushed away the ice, they gasped. Her skin bore intricate tattoos of fantastical creatures, griffins with curled claws, elk with swirling antlers. Each line punched into her flesh with soot and needle, a practice Herodotus described as marks of nobility among the Scythians. But it was her headdress that stole the spotlight, a towering vertical construction of felt and wood nearly 3 feet tall, adorned with golden cats and gilded birds. This wasn't merely decoration, it was a crown, a declaration of status so bold it would have been visible across the steppe. Beneath her, 6 horses lay buried in full regalia, their bridles studded with gold, a sacrifice meant to carry her into the afterlife with the speed and grace she'd known in life. Then came the ritual equipment. Nestled beside her coffin lay a small pouch of cannabis and a bronze incense burner. its charred residues confirming ancient accounts of Scythian purification rites. Herodotus wrote of these nomads throwing hemp onto red-hot stones, inhaling the vapors, with such joy that they howl with pleasure. The Ice Maiden's kit was no casual indulgence. It was the tool of a ritual specialist, possibly a shaman or healer who bridged the human and spirit worlds. Forensic analysis painted a vivid portrait of her final years. She died in her mid-20s, likely from breast cancer. Her bones showed telltale lesions and a lump of tissue still clung to her ribs. Yet despite her pain, she'd lived a life of astonishing mobility. The wear on her joints matched patterns seen in habitual horseback riders, while isotopic signatures in her teeth revealed childhood migrations across hundreds of miles of grassland. But the most haunting detail, her hands, clutched in her fingers, were coriander seeds, a spice imported from the Mediterranean, proof that even in the remotest reaches of the steppe, trade networks thrived. The Scythians weren't just warriors, they were connectors of worlds, their tombs stitching together continents. Modern controversies swirl around her legacy. Indigenous Altai people protested her removal, claiming she was a sacred ancestor whose rest had been disturbed. Scientists, meanwhile, faced a race against time. Once exposed to air, her skin began to darken, the tattoos fading before their eyes. Today, she rests in a climate-controlled museum, a figure caught between reverence and research, her tattoos whispering of a time when women could be both feared and revered, when death wasn't an end, but a journey taken on horseback, trailing the scent of cannabis and coriander into the stars. Beneath the rolling hills of Amphipolis, where the Strymon River cuts through northern Greece, archaeologists in 2020 uncovered a burial that whispered of opulence and artistry from a forgotten age. The tomb, dating back to the late 4th century B.C., held no grand sarcophagus or towering statues, just a single skeleton resting atop a marble slab, its skull crowned by a wreath so delicate the gold leaves trembled at the slightest breath. This wasn't just any noble's grave, it was a time capsule from the chaotic years after Alexander the Great's death, when his fractured empire bled power into the hands of regional warlords and forgotten elites. The wreath itself was a masterpiece of metallurgy. Each leaf, over 300 in total, had been painstakingly hammered from pure gold foil, their veins etched with a precision that would challenge modern jewelers. Unlike the rigid diadems of kings, this was designed to move, to catch the light like real foliage as the wearer walked. But the real surprise lay in its symbolism. Intertwined among the oak leaves were tiny golden bees, their wings raised as if frozen mid-flight. In Macedonian tradition, bees represented immortality, their honey the food of gods, but they also hinted at a connection to the Argead dynasty, Alexander's own bloodline. Was this noble a relative of the conqueror, a loyal general, or perhaps a wealthy pretender grasping at legitimacy in a world where old rules no longer applied? Then there were the walls. While looters had stripped the chamber of valuables centuries ago, they'd ignored its most enduring treasure, frescoes so vivid they seemed to pulse with life. On one side, a procession of women in flowing chitons carried offerings toward a goddess whose face had been deliberately defaced, her identity erased by later hands. Opposite them, a hunting scene unfolded. Spears pierced the air as hounds lunged at a fleeing boar, their muscles rendered in ochre and charcoal with a realism that rivaled Renaissance masters. The pigments, derived from crushed lapis lazuli and rare earth minerals, revealed trade networks stretching from Afghanistan to the Aegean. Forensic analysis of the skeleton deepened the intrigue. The bones belonged to a man in his early 30s, his femur showing signs of a healed fracture consistent with a horseback riding accident common among Macedonia's elite cavalry. But the real shock came from his teeth. Isotope analysis showed his childhood diet included seafood, an anomaly for inland Macedon. Some scholars now speculate he might have been raised in one of the coastal Greek colonies, possibly even Pella's rival city, Amphipolis itself. Had he been a local magnate who rose to prominence during the post-Alexander power vacuum, his burial suggests as much. The tomb's architecture, a vaulted chamber with a false entrance to deter grave robbers, mirrors royal Macedonian designs but on a smaller, almost aspirational scale. The most haunting detail, though, wasn't gold or paint. It was a single ceramic jug placed near his feet. Residue analysis revealed it once held wine mixed with opium, a concoction known from ancient texts as nepenthes, a drink said to soothe grief. Was this a final toast poured by mourning companions, or a ritual sedative to ease his passage to the underworld? The answer may lie in the tomb's most cryptic feature. Beneath the frescoes, faint graffiti scratched into the plaster reads, "He judged the contest fairly." A reference to funerary games, a political epitaph, the words hang in the air like smoke, refusing to be pinned down. What makes this tomb extraordinary isn't just its artistry, but its context. Built during the wars of the successors when Alexander's empire shattered into warring factions, it captures a moment when old certainties crumbled, and even second-tier elites could claim a slice of eternity. The golden wreath, the maritime isotopes, the defaced goddess, they're all fragments of a story about identity, ambition, and how power refracts in the shadow of giants. Unlike the monumental tombs of kings, this grave feels human, a testament not to cosmic glory, but to someone who lived, fought, and died trying to make sense of a world that had outgrown its myths. And perhaps that's why the bees were chosen, not just as symbols of immortality, but as creatures who thrive in the cracks, turning chaos into something sweet. When German toxicologist Svetlana Balabanova ran routine drug tests on Egyptian mummies in 1992, her lab equipment must have seemed to malfunction. The results blinking back at her defied logic: traces of cocaine and nicotine, substances native to the Americas, clinging to hair shafts and skin cells of mummies entombed 3,000 years before Columbus sailed. At first, she assumed contamination, but retest after retest yielded the same impossible conclusion. These ancient Egyptians had consumed New World plants. The implications sent shockwaves through academia. How could cocaine, a compound derived exclusively from South American coca leaves, wind up in the veins of pharaohs? The mummies tested weren't obscure nobodies. They included Rameses the Great and the noblewoman Hinat Toy, their preserved tissues telling a story that clashed with everything we knew about ancient trade networks. Mainstream Egyptologists dismissed the findings as lab error or modern contamination, but Balabanova's methodology held up under scrutiny. She'd used gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, the gold standard for forensic analysis, and her control samples, modern cadavers, showed no such anomalies. Then came the counterarguments. Some scientists proposed alternate explanations. Perhaps an extinct Old World plant once produced similar alkaloids, or maybe resins used in mummification created false positives. Others pointed to the Silk Road, suggesting obscure trade routes could have ferried these substances across Beringia or the Pacific. But the most provocative theory came from researchers like Thor Heyerdahl, who'd long argued for pre-Columbian transatlantic contact. Could Phoenician traders known to navigate the African coast have ventured further, or had the Egyptians themselves, with their sophisticated ships, crossed oceans history forgot? The controversy only deepened when similar compounds were found in mummies from Sudan and China. Suddenly, the timeline of global trade stretched into uncharted territory. Skeptics noted that no Egyptian artifacts have ever been found in the Americas, nor any New World objects in Egypt. But proponents fired back: absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, especially when dealing with perishable trade goods like plants or textiles. Modern techniques have added nuance without settling the debate. In 2018, researchers re-examined Hinat Toy's remains using updated technology. The nicotine was confirmed, but the cocaine source remains hotly contested. Some now speculate it could have come from an African plant like the enigmatic kenaf, whose chemical profile remains poorly studied. Others suggest ancient Egyptian chemists might have synthesized similar compounds from local flora, their techniques lost to time. What makes this mystery so tantalizing isn't just the chemical evidence, but what it reveals about our assumptions. For centuries, we've viewed ancient civilizations as isolated worlds. The cocaine mummies whisper a different possibility, that the globe was far more interconnected than textbooks dare to admit. Whether through trade, travel, or some forgotten botanical bridge, these traces in royal veins hint at a past far messier and far more fascinating than we ever imagined. Perhaps the real lesson lies not in proving or debunking transatlantic contact, but in embracing how much we still don't know. Science thrives on anomalies, and these mummies, with their unaccountable alkaloids, challenge us to keep questioning, keep testing, and stay open to histories that might still surprise us. After all, if there's one thing the past has taught us, it's that yesterday's heresy often becomes today's fact, and tomorrow's common knowledge. Beneath the shadow of York's medieval walls, where tourists now stroll past quaint tea shops, archaeologists in 2004 unearthed a burial that turned the city's Roman past into a theater of the macabre. A pit yawned open, revealing not the orderly graves of citizens, but a tangled mass of skeletons, each missing its head. Some skulls sat neatly between knees, others atop chests like grotesque trophies. The bones told a brutal story, vertebrae severed by blade strikes so precise they suggested execution by someone intimately familiar with the anatomy of a killing stroke. Forensic science painted an even grimmer picture. These men, all in their late teens to 30s, bore the marks of lives lived violently. Healed fractures in ribs and arms spoke of blunt force trauma, while grooves in their teeth suggested habitual grit chewing, a telltale sign of gladiators who clenched down during combat. Isotope analysis added a haunting detail. Many weren't locals, but recruits from as far as the Alps or Eastern Europe, lured to Britannia's edge by promises of gold or glory. Their bodies, dumped without ceremony in this shallow pit, hinted at a dark truth: they'd outlived their usefulness. The decapitation patterns deepened the mystery. Unlike battlefield burials where heads were taken as trophies, these skulls were carefully placed with their bodies, some even cradled in arms. This wasn't the work of invaders or rioters, but a ritual, possibly a post-mortem humiliation reserved for criminals, or a spiritual send-off ensuring the dead couldn't rise. Roman texts describe such practices for disobedient soldiers or disgraced arena fighters, their severed heads denying them passage to the afterlife, yet one skeleton bucked the trend. Dubbed the anomaly by researchers, his skull remained intact, his bones showing no combat scars. Instead, his legs bore the symmetrical grooves of long-term shackle wear. Was he a slave tasked with disposing of his master's corpses, a traitor granted mercy at the guillotine's edge? His presence whispers of a hierarchy even in death, where some sins or some souls weren't worthy of the blade. What lingers isn't just the violence, but the intimacy of it. Someone positioned those heads just so. Someone knew each man's name, his triumphs, his failures. The grave's location, outside York's Roman fortress, near what was once a marsh, suggests deliberate symbolism. In Roman belief, wetlands were liminal spaces where the living could commune with the dead. Were these executions public spectacles, warnings to others, or a private reckoning for men who'd once been celebrated? Modern reconstructions of their faces, based on skull morphology, show men with broken noses and sunken cheeks, their features frozen in eternal defiance or resignation. Their DNA carries traces of infections rarely seen today, remnants of barracks life and untreated wounds. But the most poignant detail lies in the soil itself. Traces of daisy pollen found in the grave fill, hinting that flowers were tossed atop the bodies as they molded. Even in disgrace, someone remembered they'd been human. This tomb forces us to confront Rome's duality. The civilization that gifted us laws and aqueducts also perfected the art of institutionalized slaughter. These headless men were both victims and perpetrators. Their lives and deaths a testament to an empire that could mythologize heroism while turning flesh into currency. Their grave isn't just a pit of bones, it's a mirror reflecting our own fascination with violence, spectacle, and the price of belonging to a machine that grinds finer than any sword. The mystery endures. Were they gladiators whose popularity waned or soldiers who mutinied? The answer may lie in a single artifact found nearby, a rusted iron hook, its curve matching descriptions of the hammers, the tool used to drag dead fighters from the arena's sand. Whether it's a smoking gun or a red herring, one truth remains: York's earth still holds echoes of the moment when cheers turned to silence, and the crowd's darlings became just another pile of heads. Deep within the Valley of the Kings, where the desert winds howl through forgotten corridors, one mummy's face tells a story no hieroglyph could capture. Known as the Screaming Mummy, its mouth hangs open in eternal agony, muscles contracted in a rictus of pain so vivid, it's as if death itself couldn't silence their final moments. This isn't the serene repose of a pharaoh prepared for the afterlife. It's a snapshot of suffering preserved for over 3,000 years. Forensic science peeled back the layers of this horror. CT scans revealed the mummy's body contorted in unnatural positions, its limbs bound tightly with ropes that cut into flesh, suggesting a violent death or hasty burial. But the real bombshell came from DNA analysis, linking these remains to the royal bloodline of Pharaoh Ramesses III, whose reign ended abruptly amid whispers of assassination. Ancient court documents from the so-called harem conspiracy describe a plot led by one of his lesser wives to overthrow him and place her son on the throne, a plot that may have succeeded in the most brutal way imaginable. The mummy's injuries align eerily with historical accounts. Deep slashes across the throat and a severed left toe match descriptions of the pharaoh's murder in judicial papyri, where conspirators confessed to using a ceremonial dagger. But here's where the mystery twists. The body was never formally mummified. No evisceration, no natron salts, just a desperate attempt to wrap the corpse before decomposition set in, as if someone needed to hide the evidence of regicide. The scream itself, likely caused by the head falling backward post-mortem, the ligaments of the neck desiccating in a grotesque yawn. Then there's the Hittite connection. Some scholars point to the mummy's unusual burial position face down, an affront to Egyptian tradition, as potential proof of foreign involvement. Around this time, the Hittites were known to employ assassins to destabilize rival kingdoms. Could the conspirators have had outside help? A fragment of correspondence between a Hittite prince and an Egyptian official, discovered in the ruins of Hattusa, cryptically references the falcon's fall and gold paid under moonlight. Coincidence or a smoking gun? Modern reconstructions of the mummy's face add chilling intimacy to the tale. The features, digitally sculpted from skull contours, show a man in his 60s with a broken nose and deep-set eyes, his expression frozen between fury and terror. Isotope testing found traces of henbane, a toxic plant that causes convulsions, in his hair, raising the possibility he was poisoned before the fatal blade struck. What lingers isn't just the violence, but the irony. Ramesses III spent his life erecting monuments to his invincibility, only to meet an end so chaotic, his successors couldn't even grant him proper mummification. His scream, silent for millennia, now echoes as a reminder. Even God's kings were mortal, and history's truths often lie not in grand tombs, but in the unwilling testimony of the dead. When archaeologists in Saqqara brushed away the dust from a limestone block in 2021, they uncovered a name that hadn't been spoken in millennia: Queen Neith. Her pyramid, hidden beneath the sands for over 4,000 years, wasn't just another royal tomb, it was a crime scene frozen in time. The moment the team entered the burial chamber, they found walls scarred by deliberate chisel marks, every cartouche bearing her name violently erased. This wasn't the slow erosion of centuries, it was damnatio memoriae, the ritual annihilation of memory, reserved for traitors or fallen dynasties. The pyramid itself was a paradox. Built with the precision of Egypt's Old Kingdom, its inner corridors aligned perfectly with the stars of Orion's belt, clear proof this queen once held power equal to pharaohs. Yet the burial chamber told a darker story. Fragments of her sarcophagus lay scattered, the lid smashed as if struck with frenzied blows. Nearby, a single alabaster jar bore the faintest trace of her name, overlooked in the purge. Inside, not the usual perfumed resins, but a blackened residue lab tests would later identify as myrrh mixed with ash, an offering not for the afterlife, but perhaps a hurried attempt to appease a desecrated spirit. Then came the bones. Forensic analysis revealed a woman in her early 30s, her skeleton showing signs of malnutrition in youth, then sudden wealth, likely a political marriage that elevated her from obscurity to royalty. But the real shock lay in her neck vertebrae, a clean fracture, the edges unusually sharp. This wasn't the ragged break of an accident or the slicing wound of a blade. It matched experimental replications of a unique execution method described in later texts: death by a hemp rope twisted with a wooden baton, a method designed to leave no bloodstains on palace floors. Who ordered her erasure? Clues point to the reign of Pepi II, whose 70-year rule saw unprecedented court intrigues. A fragmented papyrus from his era references the Western light extinguished, possibly hinting at Neith's downfall. Even more damning is the graffiti found in a nobleman's nearby tomb, a crude sketch of a serpent, symbol of chaos, striking a crowned figure, accompanied by hieratic text reading, "She who reached too high." What makes this discovery revolutionary isn't just the evidence of a forgotten queen, but what it reveals about how history gets written or unwritten. The artisans who defaced her tomb left one telling oversight. Beneath the hacked-away inscriptions, infrared imaging revealed the original paint layers. Neith's titles included Daughter of Ra, Beloved of Hathor, and most shockingly, King's Mother. Had she ruled as regent, was her son eliminated too? The temple archives nearby hold a clue, a list of pharaohs with one name chiseled out mid-column, the space exactly matching the length of Pepi's successor's name. Modern technology offers chilling glimpses into the cover-up. Calcium deposits on the defaced walls indicate the erasures happened within months of burial, when the plaster was still fresh. Even the pyramid's orientation was altered during construction, its original entrance sealed and a false one carved to mislead tomb robbers, or perhaps those seeking to pay respects. The most haunting detail, nestled in the rubble, conservators found a child's ivory figurine, its face rubbed smooth from handling. Was this her son's toy tossed aside in the purge? Or a votive offering left by some brave soul who remembered what the kingdom tried so hard to forget? This tomb forces us to confront how power silences its challengers. Neith's story didn't just vanish, it was murdered twice over, first her body, then her memory. Yet in the very act of erasure, her persecutors left behind their greatest gift, proof that she mattered enough to fear. The chisel marks tell us more than any pristine monument ever could, that history's loudest voices aren't always the ones carved in stone, but those someone desperately tried to smash into silence. From the golden boy, King Tutankhamun, to the screaming mummy of an assassinated pharaoh, these ancient tombs have revealed more than just treasures. They've cracked open windows into lost worlds, rewriting history with every discovery. The terracotta army guarding China's mercury-filled necropolis, the wary queen buried with weapons of war, the cliffside sarcophagi of defiant warriors who refused to bow even in death. Each tomb forces us to rethink what we know about power, belief, and the lengths humans will go to defy oblivion. Consider how these discoveries shatter stereotypes. A Viking ship cradling two women of unimaginable influence, a disabled Iberian noblewoman whose silver hands proclaimed her authority, the cocaine-laced mummies that hint at transatlantic voyages millennia before Columbus. These aren't just graves, they're time machines, showing us civilizations far more complex, interconnected, and audacious than textbooks ever suggested. The past isn't a static relic, it's a living, breathing puzzle, and every burial chamber holds another piece waiting to snap into place. So, which tomb left you breathless? The decapitated gladiators of York, their stories etched in blade marks and daisy pollen. Or perhaps the Ice Maiden, her tattoos still vibrant as she rode into eternity with her cannabis and golden headdress. Maybe the Red Queen of Palenque, whose crimson shroud and jade mask whispered of a dynasty's untold matriarchs. History isn't just written by the victors, it's whispered by the dead if we're willing to listen. If these mysteries lit a fire in your curiosity, you're not alone. Archaeology's greatest gift is the realization that there's always more to find, more tombs, more secrets, more voices waiting beneath the next shovel strike. Hit subscribe now, because this journey is far from over. From submerged cities to jungle-covered pyramids, the next mind-blowing discovery could drop any day, and you won't want to miss it. After all, the past has a way of surprising us, especially when we think we've heard all its stories. But as these 25 tombs prove, the earth never runs out of tales to tell.